Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
The book show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the new Friday afternoon book show. As always, we start the show by looking at the bestseller lists on amazon.co.uk and the Sunday Times. That is the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK. We'll be checking out what new entries there are. Then I'll be chatting to Chris Humphreys, who was born in Toronto and raised in London. His acting career has taken him from the West End to Hollywood, with stops along the way for the Bill and Coronation Street. His debut novel, The French Executioner, was shortlisted for the CWA Steel Dagger Award. His new novel, One London Day, takes you deep undercover into the murky world of the intelligence services. Then we'll be chatting to Alice Bell, who worked as a video games journalist for many years and is now the editor of the Guinness World Records Gamers Edition. Her debut novel, Grave Expectations, was selected for the BBC Radio 2 Book Club. Her third novel, The Grapples of Wrath, is a playful contemporary cosy mystery about a medium-turned-private investigator excited to embark on her first official case. We're joined by Julie Tovey, who's based in Bristol and has been writing since childhood. She studied literature at the University of East Anglia. After graduating, she went into teaching and has remained in education ever since. Her novel, Something Changed, explores the serendipity and random connections in our lives. That's just the first hour. In the second hour, we'll be chatting to Deborah Jean Weitzman, Heidi Gallagher, Caroline James and Paul Quinlan.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Let's crack on by taking a look at the Sunday Times bestseller list, the oldest and most influential book sales chart in the UK. This is the one that every author wants to be on. So Julian Barnes's final novel, Departures, narrowly misses out on the number one spot, thanks to Jeanette McCurdy's debut novel, Half His Age. Her memoir, I'm Glad My Mum Died, weirdest title ever, spent 6 weeks in the bestseller charts. In paperbacks, Frida McFadden risks losing her dominance as Rachel Reed gains 3 entries for her Game Changers series, thanks to the heated rivalry TV show streaming on Sky. So looking at general hardbacks, just 2 new entries this week. Number 1 is Always Remember by Charlie Mackesy. Number 2, The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Number 3 is Miracle by Michael Calvin and Natafli Schiff, the untold story of 51 boys who escaped the gas chamber in Auschwitz in 1944. That's one of the new entries. Number 4 is I Still Believe in Miracles by Lucas Jones. Number 5, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. Number 6, The Little Things in Life by Catherine Hapka and Mike Wall. Number 7 is the other no entry. It's called Polar War by Kenneth R. Rosen, an exploration of the geopolitical and strategic significance of the Arctic. Number 8, This Way Up by Map Men. Number 9 is A Mind of My Own by Kathy Burke. And number 10, Nobody's Girl by Virginia Roberts Gouffre. Looking at fiction hardbacks, there are 6 new entries from last week. At number 1, Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy. Number 2 is the new entry Departures by Julian Barnes, how the love between an older couple has changed throughout their lives. Number 3, new entry The Wolf King by Lauren Palfreyman, hoping she's the key to end a war, a werewolf alpha kidnaps a human princess. 4 is a new entry called The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. Vying to become empress, a peasant turned concubine learns a forbidden skill. Number 5 is The Impossible Fortune by Richard Osman. Number 6, The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. Number 7 is The Devil's Daughter by Danielle Steele. Number 8, a new entry, 12 Months by Jim Butcher. The wizard Harry Dresden seeks to rebuild his life and city after a great battle. Number 9, new entry, The Demon and the Light by Axie O. Ren finishes one battle but is faced with a war. This is a sequel to The Floating World. And number 10 is the final new entry, The Elsewhere Express by Samantha Soto Yambao. A woman wakes on a train that can help to reimagine her life. And finally, looking at Amazon.co.uk, the top 10 books this week, Frida McFadden is taking over, or still taking over. Number 1 is her newest novel, Dear Debbie. Number 2, Frida McFadden's The Housemaid. Number 3, Frida McFadden's The Housemaid Secret. Number 4, Frida McFadden's The Housemaid is Watching. Number 5, The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Number 6, Cozy Corner by Coco Wao. Number 7, The Food for Life Cookbook by Tim Spector. Number 8, Never Lie by Frida McFadden, giving her 6 in the top 10. Number 9, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And number 10 is Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed.
The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Chris Humphreys, who was born in Toronto and raised in London. His acting career has taken him from the West End to Hollywood, with stops along the way for Bill and At the Rover's Return on Coronation Street. His debut novel, The French Executioner, was shortlisted for the Crime Writers Association's Steel Dagger. He's with us on the Book Show to talk about his latest novel, One London Day. It's the start of a new series taking you deep undercover into the murky world of the intelligence services. Tightly wound action unravels over a tense 24-hour period in a broiling London summer. Welcome to the Book Show, Chris.
I'm very pleased to be here, Hannah. Thank you.
It's great to have you with us. And tell us a bit about your acting career. Sounds like you've been in some fun stuff.
Yes, well, you gave a pretty good brief summary there. The acting career has been really interesting because I've managed to balance out theatre. I appeared very strangely to me, I appeared in a West End musical in 1997 because singing and dancing is not really my forte, but I did that. It's like I'm ticking a series of boxes. I played a gladiator in a biblical Roman epic in the mid-80s. Which is one of the lead roles in this thing called Anno Domini, and that took me to Hollywood for a couple of years. And I was an immortal in Highlander, though it's a bit of a cheat because I was killed within 7 minutes. So how can I be an immortal? I don't understand. Depending on the demographic, I sort of trot out a role because there's a certain group who just loves Coronation Street, of course. And so I talk about being Clive Parnell, this likely lad up from London, conning the Northerners in the Rover's Return. But also, there's another whole demographic, this might include you, Hannah, where I was the original voice of Salem the cat in Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
No way!
Is that you? Is that your demographic?
Yes, definitely.
There you are, you see.
Oh, what fun. So how did writing come about then?
Well, I feel it's always hard looking back because I feel I always dabbled in it, but only in a very sort of cursory way between acting gigs because I was a pretty busy actor, particularly in my 20s and 30s. But, there's inevitable times when you're not, allowed to be creative. And I dabble with things, but I didn't understand what I later learned and what I now sometimes teach, which is that writing is a process. I thought it had to be good straight away. So I'd start out with these wild ideas. I've always had a very vivid imagination. And they seem quite good for the sort of first 2 hours. And then I'd look back and go, well, it's not like my hero writers, And so I'd sort of abandon things. So I had a series of abandoned projects. And then finishing things was the big problem. And then I was living in Vancouver in Canada and out of work as an actor. And I saw a 24-hour playwriting competition. And I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe if I just sit in a room, because you had to go to the room for 24 hours, I'll finish something. And I had this idea for a play. It was sort of ripped from the headlines of my life, a love story that went tragically wrong. So I went into this room. I wrote this play. I finished it. I thought, well, I finished something. That's it. And I didn't expect anything else. But I won the competition. And that gave me it gave me a production the following year and $500. So I was like, oh, I've been paid. I must be a professional writer. So I then carried on writing plays. I was commissioned for another one and then wrote a third one. But historical fiction was what I really, truly wanted to write. And I always felt that a novel was like a mountain. You know, if a play is a hill to climb because it's, you know, shorter form, a novel would just be a mountain. It'd be ridiculous. I couldn't climb it. But I had this idea. And you mentioned the book, The French Executioner. I had this idea about the man who killed Anne Boleyn, because many of your listeners will know she was killed by a French swordsman brought over specially in an act of extreme kindness by Henry VIII to his soon-to-be ex-wife, brought from France to do the clean death. And I just wondered, you know, who he was. And then I wondered something else about Anne Boleyn, her six-fingered hand. What if he took her hand when he took her head? What would happen next? And this wild idea hit me while I was in the gym, actually. It hit me. And then, because I didn't think I could write a novel, it sat with me for 6 years, but all the time it sat in there. I always think a novel, you know, and I've written 25 now, but I always think when you're starting a novel, it's like this folder, like this desktop folder opens, and it's just getting all this stuff, all these files, all these impulses, all these images, all these ideas. And that folder gradually filled up over the next 6 years. And finally, I just sat down and wrote it. And it burst out of me. And I thought, it's not bad. So I thought I'd better get an agent. And I got an agent, and she had it sold in Orion in a 2-book deal for, in 3 months later or something. So suddenly I'm on the road, and I start to figure, I mean, I'm still struggling with process, and I still have a lot of self-doubt around if it's any good or not then. But then I've worked out since, you take the words good or bad out of your vocabulary and you just write a first draft and then see what happens. So
yeah. And has your process changed over the years?
Not a huge amount. I think I'm just a little more confident in it, in that I just allow it to, I came up with this sort of odd phrase once, and this agent who I said it to looked at me in a bemused manner before he took it on board. And I said, you know what I think? I think that writing is writing. And he went, okay, edging slightly away from me at the bar. And I said, no, listen, it's not thinking about writing. You have to think about writing sometimes. There's different stages. But when you're actually sitting down to write, your mind is, it sounds ridiculous to say, but your mind is far cleverer than you are. You know, the mind will do things if you just get out of its way. And so I sat down. I tend not to pre-plan very much. I got an idea of characters and I set them running, and things happen. And so that part of the process, I mean, I've got a little more organized around, structure perhaps, and things like that. But generally, no, it hasn't really changed much. Once I accepted that these rules, it's only a first draft. You never show your first draft to anyone, and you take the words good or bad from your vocabulary in regard to it. Yeah, it's not a good sentence or bad. I mean, they're never useful, those words. Does it work or doesn't it work is the only criteria, really. But yeah, so that's how it proceeded.
And presumably because you've done it so many times now, it's not such a big mountain to climb, or is it each time? Do you go, oh, here we go, page 1?
Well, there is a moment when you're settling down and facing the blank screen for the first time. But those moments would last, several weeks earlier in my career. And now it's like, oh my God, it's another novel. And then you go, yeah, just start writing it. So yes, that has definitely got easier. I mean, there was a time when, I'd written about 3 novels and I'd have to look at them and think, oh yeah, no, I have done this before. Remember you can do it. And then that would take me a little more time to get into it. But now it's pretty much, what's the idea? Who's the character? What does he want? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So tell us about One London Day. I love that it's all set in 24 hours. What made you do that?
Well, it intrigued me, the idea that action could be condensed that way. I will have to say this. It's a bit of a cheat in that there are some flashbacks in order to understand how this man got himself in this situation. So though the basic action takes place over 24 hours, in fact, it takes place over less, really, because it begins with a dawn hit. I'm not giving too much. There's no spoilers here really, because it's on the cover copy. It begins with a hit near dawn in a very quiet street in Finchley, and ends in sort of mayhem in Portobello Market that night. So it's almost 14 hours actually. But yeah, I mean it's such an interesting book for me, One London Day. I mean, I love all my children, I have to tell you, because I regard them as my children. But One London Day is special, partly because it's such an outlier for a man who's written either historical fiction or fantasy fiction to actually do a modern novel. And it came out of a sort of, a strange confluence of my life and where I was at the time, and missing London because I was living back in Canada and I missed London a lot, and what the screenwriters called an inciting incident. Very sadly for her, a friend of mine witnessed a hit in front of her house in this totally middle-class suburban street. It was so ordinary. My first title for the project was Ordinary Day. This ordinary man killed on this ordinary street on this really ordinary day. How did he get there? And this friend saw it, and I'd written down a few ideas at the time about it, and then shelved it. I actually didn't think about it again. And then 13 years later, I pulled out an old notebook which said Ordinary Day on the cover. I thought, what's that? I have no idea what that is. And I opened it up. I thought, oh. And it was the time to write it. Sometimes there's a time for a book. And I mean, the key, I suppose, is throw nothing out, which drives my partners absolutely crazy, of course, but I can't.
So tell us about the main characters.
Well, this was the other thing I wanted to do with this book. I didn't want it to be a straightforward protagonist-antagonist with a couple of extra players. I really wanted it to be in the form of a sort of relay race, that we see these people who somehow have come together over this one London day from all these different areas. They come together in this sort of brutal climax. And where did they come from? So each character, it begins really, the first line is Mr. Phipps was in the gym, because the hitman, and it's interesting, Hannah, I almost never struggle with names. It's like, even if I don't know anything about them, the character walks in and goes, yeah, this is my name. And so in this case, Mr. Phipps walked into my novel, and he's in the gym because he likes to work out before a hit. He always does it. It's like this thing he has to do before he goes and kills someone. So he's in the gym working out, and he's thinking about his 5-year-old daughter he's got to pick up later. He hates picking her up on the day of a gig. So he's an ordinary man as well, doing this extraordinary thing. But then we follow the victim. And in a strange way, perhaps it's his story most of all. Joe Severin, again, the name just came to me, who's an accountant, a pillar of the local business and Jewish communities, absolutely as straight as a die, you think. But he's got himself involved with this group called the Shadows, who are an MI6 sort of rogue op headed by this psychopath called Sebastian. They're all frightfully upper class. There's all Magdalen, and Bedale School and the Athenaeum Club and things. And they're making a fortune from intel. They're putting money into the fact that they know where the people smuggling is happening, where the antiquities are coming out of Syria, where the drugs are being transported. But they wanted someone to do their books, and Joe Severin was an accountant at one stage, even though he's more a property manager now. So he does the books for extra money, old school, in double entry in ledgers, because the only trail you can't trace is a paper one, right? But he makes a mistake, and draws their attention to him and thus becomes the victim. But one of the reasons he gets their attention is because he's fallen in a moment. This is the catastrophic moment for him because he's seen the small of the back of one of his tenants and he suddenly is besotted by her. And so she then has a connection with an actor. She's a pianist, Lottie. She has a connection with an actor, her sometime on and off boyfriend, Patrick, who's a very hot young Ghanaian actor in London. And he's become obsessed by a Russian escort called Sonia, who's only in London for a year. She's not normally an escort, but she has to make a lot of money because her daughter is dying of osteosarcoma. And so she has to get her to a hospital in America and pay for it. So she's earning money the best way she can. She's beautiful, Sonia. But she's also ex-Russian secret forces, special forces. And so all these characters, the villains and the heroes and just the ordinary people on this ordinary day get caught up in this effectively a murder mystery spy plot.
Fab. I love it. So you say you don't plan, but with all the different characters and all the different things going on, was it difficult without having a plan beforehand?
Well, when I say I don't plan, I suppose I plan characters more than plots. Okay. The plot will unfold through the characters. So if I begin by getting the character, I'm interested in writing about this guy I went to school with. I mean, that's the other thing. It's all set on my patch in North London, Hampstead, Finchley. I was at school with Joe Severn. I used to play football with him, So I wanted to write about those people. I'm an actor. I've worked in musicals. I knew Lottie, the jazz pianist. I knew this specific young lady who was also known as Chaos on Two Legs because she was out there, and bizarrely, I met a Sonia. Though she wasn't an escort, she was very beautiful. And years before, I'd learned this astonishing fact about this beautiful Russian who'd got out of Russia, was living in Canada, that she, at one point in her life, when she was 19 years old, she'd been the fastest Kalashnikov stripper in the Soviet army.
What does that even mean?
Well, exactly. She could strip a Kalashnikov machine gun faster than any man in the army.
That's brilliant.
And I thought, well, that's going in a book.
Definitely.
And so Sonia, and I mean, this was years later, but Sonia then appeared. And so that's how I do it, really. I get these characters and I introduce them. I knew Sebastian's. I was at school with Sebastian's. And, that entitled upper class Englishman, and I thought, oh, I know him. And basically, without a man who can operate without guilt in any way, only for himself. So put them all together, see what happens it's set in the summer of 2018, which you'll no doubt remember was the hottest summer since 1976. Mm-hmm. So it's baking hot in London, which, and London, the city, and in a way, the weather are characters as well, because they directly affect what the characters do.
And this is the first book in a new series, yeah?
Yes. I mean, I would say yes. No, it is a series. It's a loose-ish. So, I mean, it's an interesting story because I wrote that book and my publishers, none of them wanted it. It was a bit of, I think, stay in your lane, son. You write historical fiction. Why do this crime thing? So I self-published it back in 2018 and didn't sell many copies at all. But then earlier at the London Book Fair last year, a wonderful editor, Leslie Crooks at Allison & Busby, was looking for male thrillers. And my agent said, have a look at this. And she said, I really like it. I'll have 3 of them. And I went, oh, okay. So I had to come up with a, but in fact, I'd already thought how it could go on. I mean, some of the characters can't because they're no longer with us. Or they're, they've had their comeuppance or whatever. But there were 2 key characters I knew I could take on. One was Mr. Phipps himself, the hitman, and one was Ellerby, who's this, she's actually broken through 2 glass ceilings at MI5 because she's a woman and she's black. And she is the main instigator who brings the shadows, or pursues the shadows, I'll say. I won't tell you more than that. And so she's able to go on to Berlin. It's a very different plot. But again, I use it's almost a premise plot or premise series as much as any sort of regular character moving on. Because again, I take 6 seemingly disparate people and draw them into the plot. And the same will be true when I get down to writing it, because I've just delivered one Berlin day to my publisher, Leslie.
Great.
Yeah, I just delivered it 2 weeks ago. So that's, first draft done. And now I'm starting to think of one Istanbul day.
Oh, exciting. Great stuff. Well, in the meantime, listeners can get a copy of One London Day from our website, TRE.radio, in the bookshop section. It is by Chris Humphreys, who we've been chatting with today. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Great chatting.
Thank you, Hannah. It's been a pleasure.
The Book Show with Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Alice Bell. She worked as a video games journalist for many years and is now the editor of the Guinness World Records Gamers Edition. Her debut novel, Grave Expectations, was selected for the BBC Radio 2 Book Club. The Grapples of Wrath is her third novel, following on in the Grave Expectations series. It's a playful, contemporary, cosy mystery about a medium turned private investigator called Claire Hendricks, who is excited to embark on her first official case. Welcome to the Book Show, Alice.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
It's great to have you. So, wow, gaming, working in gaming and working for Guinness World Records, that must be fun.
Yes, it's never a dull moment, especially at Guinness World Records. So you never know what the day may bring. So you might come into work and find that, the world's oldest horse has died unexpectedly, and now you need to scramble to find the next world's oldest horse. So it's, always a fresh adventure. Yeah. And how did you get into writing novels then? Well, it was a lockdown baby, my debut, as many debut authors were in 2023. But I'd always wanted to write books, and I'd always sort of fiddled with manuscripts here and there and never really properly finished anything, but the lockdown gave me the opportunity to finish a whole 90,000 word book, and luckily other people were interested in it as well. Yeah, brilliant. So where did your idea come from for that first book, Grave Expectations? Well, I grew up in the English countryside. I find it very sort of full of stories. Like the land feels very old itself, in sort of Wiltshire and places like that, near Stonehenge and everything. And I was very familiar with sort of crumbling old English country houses and English country families, big kind of posh, rugger, hunting, shooting, fishing types. Mm-hmm. And so that's a very sort of Gothic tradition in literature. And with mediums, I sort of thought, I read a ghost story and I thought, well, what if you could actually see ghosts all the time? It's always sort of mystical and mysterious, but it would probably be quite rubbish if you could see ghosts everywhere you went. It would be quite destabilizing to having a normal day if you were buying a Twix and you saw a ghost, Yes, good point. Absolutely. So without giving too much away, because obviously it's a follow-on, isn't it? It's in the series. So can you tell us a bit about what happens in Grave Expectations without, as I say, giving too much away? Yeah. So the two main characters are Claire, as you said, and her best friend, Sophie, who happens to be dead. Sophie died when they were both 17 years old and, of course, has then never aged. So it's a bit Randall and Hopkirk deceased, but you sort of sad girls, I suppose. And they are hired to do a seance at an old school, or an old university friend, I should say, of Claire's house. And while they're there, this big kind of posh family in a slightly, as I said, crumbling, falling down old manor house, they see a ghost of a murdered person, but they can't remember who they are or what happened to them. So Claire feels sort of duty bound to investigate. And thus does. She sort of accidentally investigates a murder that first time. Okay, so with this is book 3 then, yeah? So yes. Where are we now? Well, we are now in Brighton, and Claire is, as you said, taking on her sort of first official case, although it isn't planned as a murder investigation. She is hired by the new owner, or I say owner operator, of a local pro wrestling gym, an independent pro wrestling gym, whose father recently died, and he is convinced his father is haunting the gym. So he hires Claire to do an exorcism, but she meets his father, who is indeed haunting the place. And his father is absolutely convinced that he was murdered. And so she then is sort of separately engaged by the ghost of Eddie King to investigate his own death.
Okay. And why pro wrestling? What was the connection there?
Well, I really love pro wrestling. I don't know if it's, I don't know why, but there's a huge crossover between fans of video games and fans of pro wrestling. So I didn't grow up as a pro wrestling fan, but I sort of fell into it or absorbed it through osmosis through my work. And, you know, we're past the years of sort of big haystacks or giant haystacks and things, but because it was huge, obviously, in the UK for a long time. Now it's the big American promotions where they all have lovely white teeth and things, but it's still a massive, you know, stadium-filling cultural juggernaut.
Yeah.
And I really love it. It's very Shakespearean. It's so impressive. And I think more people would like it if they tried watching it.
Interesting.
So I just wanted to bring something, again, that I like into my work.
Yeah.
Which always makes it more fun.
Definitely makes it more fun and makes it better for you. It makes sense that you're writing about things that you know and are passionate about.
Yeah. And wrestling, pro wrestling in particular, because we're not talking about, Olympic floor wrestling.
Right.
We're talking about the electrifying world of sports entertainment, which it's real in that they all do these very athletic and impressive and acrobatic, death-defying feats of, flips and jumps and could really hurt themselves. But in the way that a football season can tell an incredible story with highs and lows, wrestling can tell an incredible story of highs and lows. It just doesn't leave that story to chance. It's the difference. So the outcomes are predetermined, but you still get a lot of fun out of watching it. And it's a little bit more like theatre, but it comes from carnival performances and sideshows. So that sort of seemed to fit with the sort of seaside arcadey vibe of Brighton as well. And there is a tradition in seaside towns in the UK of pro wrestling promotions. So it's a nice fit.
Yeah, because a lot of people, I suppose, don't really get it because they think that it's not real, like the wrestling you would get in the Olympics, as you say. So they sort of struggle to understand the whole hype and point of it, I suppose. Yes,
I think just seeing it as a theatrical performance is the way to go. It's Shakespeare, but all id, right? It's because what they're doing, as I say, is real. Everything you see them doing is real. They're really doing, and they can really hurt themselves. So there's a lot of skill in not hurting themselves.
Yeah.
At the same time, setting for a story, because so much of pro wrestling is about trying to fool you into what's real and what isn't. And there's a huge kind of crossover between things that happen in the ring and things that happen outside the ring. So in the 70s, 80s, there was a really successful wrestler turned promoter turned booker called Jerry Jarrett in America, who had a sign on the wall that said personal issues draw money, which means if two wrestlers really, really hate each other in real life, you should make them fight each other in the ring as well, because it'll make the performance better.
Yeah.
And so even today, there's a lot of behavior that goes on behind the scenes in wrestling companies that would get you fired if you did it in your real job. So a few years ago, there's a big promotion called AEW, and a bunch of the vice presidents at the company, who are also wrestlers, got into a physical fight with some of the performers. And it's, is it real? Is it not? There's a lot of that going on. And so when my character Claire is investigating a crime in a pro wrestling promotion, part of the struggle is figuring out when they're putting on a performance and when they're not.
Yes, clever. And when you're writing a mystery like this, do you have to plot a lot beforehand? Do you kind of need to know where you're going with the story?
Do you know, there's a lot of debate about this with mystery writers. Generally, there are sort of three camps when we talk about this that we fall into. There are plotters who have everything on a whiteboard, and they have, bits of red string like a conspiracy board, and they're linking everything up, and they have post-it notes and spreadsheets, and they know everything as they go along. And then there are pantsers who fly by the seat of their pants, and they just make it up as they go along. And I'm in the middle which is what we get called plotsers or plantsers, which is sort of half and half. So I have the key things planned out, and I know who done it, but then I sort of pants my way between those key beats. And sometimes go back and put, more red herrings and things in afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like all of these things, it's that there's no right or wrong way necessarily. You just need to work out what makes sense to you and what helps you write the process.
Exactly. And I'm not one of those authors that I don't mind if you work it out before the end, because that means you've picked up on the themes and clues that I left in the book. So I think that's fine. I'm very happy if you do.
Yeah. And do you know how many there's going to be in this series? Have you worked that out?
Oh, I do indeed, yeah. So there is going to be one more after this, which I'm just finishing up now, which is going to be called For Whom the Spell Tolls, which is about witches, as the name suggests. So there's going to be a trio of kind of modern internet witches and a coven of ghost witches as well. And then the final book in the series, which will be the fifth one, will be solving Sophie's murder and finding out why she's a ghost.
Okay, interesting. So have you thought about what you might do after that, or just totally focused on this series at the moment?
I've got one or two ideas floating around, yeah. I quite want to do something a bit 90s, because I think we're all a little bit nostalgic for the 90s these days. And I think it'd be quite fun to go back and, those fashions and things like that. So I've got an idea for that. And also I'm toying around with some horror things. I've got a horror short story coming out in a collection, I think next year or the year after. But for now, very much focused on getting the series buttoned up, I think.
Yeah, great. Well, if people want to get a copy, I like your titles as well. Sorry, just have to say.
Yeah. I'm locked in a pun death spiral with it now.
Yeah, nice. Like it. This one is called The Grapples of Wrath, and it's available on our website, tre.radio. It's by Alice Bell, who we've been chatting with. Alice, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I hope you have a lovely day.
You are listening to The Book Show on TRE.
Joining us on the line now is Julie Tovey. She's based in Bristol and has been writing since childhood. She studied literature at the University of East Anglia, and after graduating went into teaching and has remained in education ever since. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her novel Something Changed, which explores the serendipity and random connections in our lives. Welcome to the Book Show, Julie.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. And what a nice idea for a novel. Where did you get the inspiration from?
I think, during lockdown, like a lot of people, I was kind of going stir crazy, teaching online partly. And one of my favourite novels is David Nicholls' One Day. And I kind of wanted to write something along those lines, something that was a rom-com, but I think what's so great about Nicholls' novel is that it also contains great tragedy, and it doesn't have that really neat resolution of the typical rom-com at the end. And I wanted to kind of write something similar, I suppose, something that didn't have a neat resolution at the end and didn't tie up all the loose ends.
Yeah. So tell us about your two main characters.
So Anna is quite a feisty character. She's very independent and she's highly intelligent. Dan's slightly less gregarious, slightly less sociable, bit of a geek, strong silent type. And they kind of, in good rom-com style, they kind of meet, are attracted to each other, but ultimately kind of rub each other up the wrong way, I think.
And where do you get them meeting? Tell us about the setting and the time period.
Yeah, so they meet at the end of the 80s. It's set in 1989. There's sort of two time frames, present day, 21st century, and then 1989. And they first meet in halls of residence. And the fact that Anna's in halls of residence is quite by chance because a flat share breaks up. And, they meet each other in the halls of residence, and he initially ignores her, which he thinks is extraordinarily rude. But underneath that kind of surface indifference, she can sense that there's an attraction there. And that's when their kind of affair develops, really, and and kind of sparks, I suppose.
Yeah. And the other setting is it late 90s? You're talking about Labour being voted in and Britpop and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the two time frames are kind of from 1989 really until the end of the 90s. So kind of over a decade. And that's the past timeline. And then you have the present timeline of the son, Jack, who's, going on his university open day and visiting the university where his parents met, effectively. So, so you've got these kind of two timelines playing out there.
Okay, so do we know about the son quite early on? You haven't just dropped a big bombshell, have you?
I might have dropped a big bombshell. It kind of it starts, I think, with the scene in London with Jack going around the kind of halls of residence with Anna and with Dan, and then it kind of transports them. It transports Anna back into the past.
Nice. So did you write it as it's written, or did you write it kind of chronologically and then piece it all together?
The writing process was a really interesting one, because when I was studying writing and literature at university, you were given exercises to do, and often it would be a really laborious process, and lots of revisions and lots of rewrites. And I think I read something actually by Anne Tyler, which inspired me. And she very rarely plots out an entire novel before she starts writing. And she always writes longhand. And that's exactly how I approached this book. So when I'd finished online teaching for the day, I would pick up a line A4 pad and a biro, and I would spend several hours just writing anything that came out. And then the revision and the editing process came later, when I'd finished the longhand writing and I was word processing it. So that's when I went through, and I would imagine I probably cut about 40% of the novel during that editing process.
Wow. And how was that? Was that really difficult?
Yeah, when you read it back through, sometimes things just don't fit, or they seem unnecessary. They seem to get in the way of the plot. I think editing is a hugely important part of writing, is kind of just cutting it down to the bare bones of the plot, really, and the characterization, and allowing that to kind of shine through, rather than having, lots of kind of extraneous material in there.
Yeah. So was it quite easy then? Was it obvious to you which bits needed to go?
Yeah, it was, but I needed to have time away from it. So after I'd finished writing it longhand, I didn't look at it for quite some time. And then you come back to it with fresh eyes and you think, oh, no, I don't think the character would have reacted that way at that point, or, that's not consistent with their behaviour later, or you find that you might have accidentally contradicted yourself or something like that. So, so there were lots of scenes where it was obvious. I also had a really good friend who's a copy editor read it and point a few things out. And I was kind of like, that's not consistent with the character. So I'd change it or cut bits so that it was a little bit more consistent.
Yeah. And did you enjoy the process? Has it made you want to write more?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I think often we get kind of caught up in our everyday lives, don't we? Particularly if we're busy professionals. And that kind of state of flow that people talk about, I think I got into that state of flow. So I would be writing for 3 or 4 hours and look up and think that I'd only started 10 minutes ago. You kind of lose track of time. You get so absorbed. And it was really interesting, because as I was writing, it was almost like I was watching a film on screen, and that I was almost writing what I could see. And one of my early reviews that's come out has kind of said, we really hope it gets made into a film. And I think it does have that kind of slightly cinematic quality. I think you can kind of visualize it on a screen. And certainly that's how I saw it in my mind's eye when I was writing it down on the page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose it helps to visualize it, because if you can see the characters and what they're wearing, then I guess that comes across more in the writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm already working on my second novel, the ideas for my second novel now. So it's definitely inspired me to write more.
Yeah, good. And do you plan a lot? Are you making lots of notes before starting the writing of the next novel? How do you start the process?
No, I'm not. I think if you're writing, murder mysteries, thrillers, that kind of thing, or historical novels, you have to do lots of research. You have to do lots of plotting. You have to do lots of planning. I have an idea of the beginning, a rough idea of the middle and the end. But actually, the ending of this novel didn't end where I thought it was going to end. And I rewrote the ending probably about 8 or 9 times before I was happy with it. But yeah, I start off with a kind of rough idea, and then my approach is just to get it all down on paper first and then go back and revise it. So I'm not really a great plotter, to be absolutely honest. I just let it all come out on paper, and then I sort it out once I've got the ideas down.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, if people want to get a copy of Something Changed, it's out now. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Julie Tovey, who we've been chatting with. Julie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second part of today's book show. In the first hour, we were chatting with Chris Humphreys, Alice Bell and Julie Tovey. In this hour, we'll be joined by Deborah Jean Weitzman, who's a native New Yorker who has spent her life travelling the world. A sailor of the soul and a hopeless romantic, these travels have defined and informed her writing. Her debut novel, The Sinking of the Leonardo da Vinci, is about a dreamy, sensitive young woman who lives with a constant ache of loneliness. That is until she meets Luca aboard an ocean liner bound for Europe. Also chatting to Heidi Gallagher, who holds a master's in creative writing and focuses on bringing history to her novels. A Theory in Vienna is based on the true story of a forgotten hero, a real-life medical practitioner whose life-saving discovery was rejected by the establishment. I'll also be chatting to Caroline James, the celebrated author of later life fiction, including The Cruise, the #1 bestseller that has captivated cruise ship passengers worldwide. Her latest novel, Atticus Arnott's Great Adventure, was born from a simple kitchen table conversation when her husband asked, "How do you fancy spending our winters in Spain?" It's a story full of heart and hope, sure to inspire a wave of readers to head to Spain in a delightful twist on the Shirley Valentine effect. And finally, on today's book show, Paul Quinlan. He's an academic with a long track record of publishing in the field of political science. His debut novel, Flashover, is loosely inspired by the terrible series of murders attributed to the monster of Florence in the 1980s when Paul was living there. And that is today's book show on Talk Radio Europe.
The Book Show, presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Deborah Jean Weitzman. She is a native New Yorker who has spent her life travelling the world. A sailor of the soul and a hopeless romantic, these travels have defined and informed her writing. She's the author of the memoir Pandora Learns to Sing, as well as an award-winning singer-songwriter with numerous television and radio appearances. Her musical Island in the Storm, recipient of several grants, premiered in Oslo, Norway. She's with us on the book show to talk about her debut novel, The Sinking of the Leonardo da Vinci. It's partly set in New York in 1976 and is about Joanna, a dreamy, sensitive young woman who lives with a constant ache of loneliness. Music calls to her, but it feels just out of reach, as if she needs someone else's permission to enter it. That permission comes unexpectedly when she meets Luca aboard the Leonardo da Vinci, an ocean liner bound for the Caribbean. Tell us about your singing. I want to hear about your singing career. It sounds fascinating.
Well, that was more in my younger years. I mean, I still sing every day. During my younger years, I wrote songs endlessly, maybe also as Joanna from That Ache, and also from Hopeless Unrequited Love Stories. And I got lucky. I was living in San Francisco when the 1989 earthquake struck. And I had just made a recording, and the guitar player from Italy had a list of agents in Europe. And I sent my new recording to these agents and was picked up by somebody in Wales, actually. And that began my touring career.
Oh, amazing.
And then I got a recording contract in the Netherlands and ended up moving to the Netherlands.
Wow. And what about your musical?
Well, I wish I could tell you more about it. At the moment, it's having a little pause as I focus on the novel. It's a climate change, although hopeful, musical. And I think we're in a time now where, let's say, the producers want something even more distracting. But it's sadly not going to lose. It's going to always be timely because I don't think we're getting away from climate change. So I'll work on it again. But, you can only focus on one child at a time. So I'm now focusing on the novel.
And it premiered in Norway. What's your connection to Norway?
Well, I officially live in Oslo, even though I had gotten a recording contract in the Netherlands, and I love living in the Netherlands. There was a point when the Netherlands was very overcrowded, and anyone from the US or from Canada, unless we played in an orchestra, which singer-songwriters usually don't, we had to leave. And the only way I could stay was to marry a Dutchman. And I actually, ironically, did meet a Dutchman who I fell in love with, and he with me. I was singing on one of the Dutch islands in the summer of 1997. He was living in Oslo, though. So I went with him to Oslo to stay, to have it like a grounding in Europe. But, I officially live there, and I have a passport now from Norway, which makes it easier to travel.
Yeah, lovely.
So, yeah, and right now I am not so far. Well, I don't know if you're still in Malaga area.
Yeah.
But I'm just now actually in Portugal.
Oh,
we often
lovely.
we escape the winter of Norway coming south.
Nice. So is Joanna, your character, then partly based on you or some of your experiences?
Some, I had moved away, and one of the places I lived in between after leaving Netherlands, because I'm not such a fan. Norway is too far north. I'm very Mediterranean, and that's far. So I lived for a while in Berlin, which is an amazing city, and I went to visit my mom, and a lot of my things were in her basement. There had been a flood. I went through the boxes. Everything was destroyed with the kind of black mold that can happen with water, except one diary. It was very bizarre. One diary was absolutely perfect. And it was my own diary I had written of myself, but it was from 1976. And this was in 2010. So it was like a long time ago. I read about my own life and got very curious. And so some of it comes from that original diary in the backstory, but then I wrote a what if. I was filled with 1,000 questions. So the Cinque Terre is a braided story. So the Cinque Terre part of the story is completely made up.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So the idea of being on an ocean liner, had you had experience with that?
Exactly. That came from my diary. I was a young, poor New York City girl with a scholarship to go to NYU, and I had a job at a travel agency. This was in the 70s. Sorry, I'm that old. I was young once. And that was the time when people phoned, to get to book their trip, and you got sent on to somewhere so you could sell that trip. So my boss sent me, a young poor kid to represent the agency on this, at that time, the most beautiful the Queen Elizabeth and I think the Leonardo da Vinci were the two beautiful ships at the time.
Lovely.
I mean, much smaller than anything we have now. It was a really beautiful ship. And he even gave me money to buy new clothes. So that part of the story is true. And I really did meet somebody on the ship. And never, it was, I don't know about you, Hannah, but I suffered a big love when I was young that kind of sort of stayed with me as like a marker, like I'll never fall in love like that again. So why bother feeling? I fell in love briefly, which kind of wrote songs, but never deeply, because I was afraid. I think I was just too afraid to get that hurt again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is definitely a novel. If anyone suffers from that, let's call it the big love syndrome, or the terror, which I don't think I'm the only one. I have seen that now as I'm doing some book events and, being invited to some book clubs, that this seems to resonate with not only women. I have had a lot of male readers, they readers, transgender readers, anyone who has been really in love and kind of broken by it.
Yeah.
Or at least confused by it, right?
So what was your experience being on the ship like? How long were you on it?
Well, I don't want to give away the book because I do describe some of that on the book. It was 11 days. And that was the most I'd ever been on anything on the water. So, I did write some of my own fear. I was terrified, to be honest, at the very beginning. I mean, I'd never done anything like that. I think I'd been in a rowboat or maybe a canoe. But, you go off out, and this was winter in New York City. And I remember there were really high waves. And I fell over a few times. I mean, I really had to learn how to be on a ship. Yeah, it was a little bit scary and of course, also amazing and wonderful. I was a young kid. As I said, poor as a church mouse. And, and then, I was the youngest by, I don't know, at least a million years. It was mostly older, wealthy people on this cruise. And then there's this young 20-year-old New Yorker, And one older woman, she really befriended me. And I also write her. I didn't remember exactly, and I didn't write much about that in my diary. But so I kind of created her for the book. And that's my character, Stella. And I really loved her. Yeah. And I've recently done the audiobook, and I really had fun reading Stella. She was a very, very lively character.
Oh, nice. And back in New York, the character of Joanna reconnects with Stuart. What can you tell us about him?
Well, when I found this diary that I said kind of informed this novel, the very first page of this diary was, I can't believe my geology professor. I was a music major, but I had to take some requirements. And I took this geology course and loved it. And I took it again. And he was already talking about climate change in 1976.
Wow.
My husband, who I'm still married to, this Dutchman who saved me, he works with climate change. So I was very intrigued by this coincidence. So the character of Stuart is a lot based on my husband, I have to say.
Okay.
Because the Stuart character was just, I was very young. I didn't write much about it in the diary. And I only remembered I had a wonderful professor. And there is a kind of scene at the very beginning of the book when I have to go, and this is based on what really happened. I had to go on this cruise. And I was at university. So I needed okays from all my professors to go. And this professor, that was the geology one, talking already about climate change, I felt very guilty, like I was sort of betraying the cause going on a cruise. And it was actually in my diary that he wrote, he said, "You will forget everything you learned in this course, but you will remember the cruise," which was true.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Right? The things of our life, I mean, the times we really fell in love or when something moved us beyond anything, you remember those times.
Yeah.
I really remember those times, and I did. And I, again, finding this diary, it wasn't that I didn't think about these things. I mean, as I said, I kind of held this big love as sort of, I don't know, like a tandem around my neck or something. But, and I have to say, writing the novel improved my relationship with my husband. Weirdly enough,
that's nice.
Or maybe not. Yeah. I kind of explored this theme of love. What is that idea of big love? What actually happened?
Yeah. And I have to say, having written a memoir before, why didn't you write this as a memoir? Why did, as so much of it is true and based on experience, why did you turn it into a novel?
Because I had so many questions that were unanswered, and there was no truth in my life. I never saw this person again. I never knew what happened. So it seemed that, I was taking a lot of writing courses after I had written my memoir, and like, what is the difference between memoir and fiction?
Mm-hmm.
In fiction, we get to make it up. I needed to make it up. So therefore, you have fiction. I took some roots from my own life, but the main of it is, all the characters that came. I have to say, it was my first novel, and I hope not my last, because it was really not just fun, but startling when your fingers are typing away and a character appears. I really learned that in the classes, just keep on writing and see what happens. It's like, oh, who are you? And then there's a character on the page, and you're like, and not all of them I kept, but some of them you think, oh, this is a really interesting character, and then seeing, because I'm not a fast writer. So I worked on the book. I had a lot of different editors. I worked on it in classes. I workshopped it, and it went through different evolutions. And, the characters that have stayed in the book, I really love them all, but I made them up.
So are you already working on another novel?
No, I'm actually now working on another memoir, and in the back burner, maybe another novel.
Okay.
So.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, if listeners want to get a copy of The Sinking of the Leonardo da Vinci, it is out now. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Deborah Jean Weitzman, who we've been chatting with today. Deborah, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Hannah. This was a pleasure. Thank you.
The Book Show with Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now is Heidi Gallagher. She holds a master's in creative writing and focuses on bringing history to life through her novels. She's with us on the Book Show to talk about her novel, A Theory in Vienna. It's based on the true story of a forgotten hero, a real-life medical pioneer whose life-saving discovery was rejected by the establishment. Welcome to the Book Show, Heidi.
Thanks a lot. Good to be here.
Oh, pleasure. It's great having you with us. So tell us about this chap and how you came across him and what he did.
Okay, so I came across him. I was researching for my first novel, which I wrote in 2019. And in the novel, someone gives birth. It's the 1890s, so I had to research how that was back then. First of all, it was filthy dirty in the hospitals. And I thought, this seems late to have all this going on. The name Semmelweis arose. I hadn't heard of him. Hardly anyone I know had heard of him. I researched him further, and the story hooked me in. He discovered in 1847 about hand hygiene, and basically nobody listened to him. And as late as 1890, 50 years later, nobody had taken on what he said. And so I thought I would research him. And when I did, I thought, this is a book, this is a novel.
Gosh, so before that, people weren't even thinking about washing their hands?
No, it was absolutely terrible back in the 19th century. Doctors actually wore their sort of uniforms in the hospital, what they wore to do operations, like with a badge of pride. Like the more blood it had on it, the better. It was like a badge of pride to show that you'd done loads of operations and that you were like a good surgeon, and none of them washed their hands. And this is what the book is all about, because women were dying in their droves in giving birth, and Semmelweis wondered why, and he found out why, but nobody listened to him.
And what was the reason that he found out?
Well, because he was working on the wards and the statistics were really bad. But there was one ward where women weren't dying. And this ward was run purely by midwives. The midwives would do the examinations and the doctors would just come in and talk to them. And on the ward where Semmelweis was, the doctors were doing everything and doing examinations. There was no hygiene and the women were dying. So he realised that it was something to do, with the hygiene. And when hygiene was employed, when doctors washed their hands, the bad statistics improved. And he tried to, it's all in the book. He was a bit of a bumbling genius, and he wasn't very good at getting proof for what he thought. But it's a moving story. It really is.
So people didn't believe him when he was saying what a difference it would make if people washed their hands?
No, he wrote a very, very unwieldy book about it all and sent it to fellow doctors, and they ridiculed him. And so some of them stood up for him. Some of them realised, some of them tried employing what he was suggesting. Doctors would wash their hands when they went from one patient to another, when they started work. And the statistics improved, and these doctors stood up for him. But far too many just said, this is rubbish. Back then, they didn't really understand about germs and how important it is to be clean, especially when you're performing operations. And you just couldn't get it across.
I guess it was difficult to prove back then as well.
Yeah, it was. He was very lucky. He had colleagues, his close friends in the hospital believed in what he said and could see that things were changing as he employed his methods. And some of these went and stood up and talked at conferences about Semmelweis's work and begged other doctors to, believe in him. But he himself, he didn't really do anything. Another doctor who's in the book encouraged him to perform experiments like on animals to prove, which back then, I think it was done. I mean, it's a horrible thing, but it was done back then. And they said, look, try and prove that, if you introduce contagions into animals, then, a lot of them will die if you introduce germs. But he did no experiments. He just thought that people would just believe him. 2 years of research about Semmelweis, and it's such a fascinating story because in the end, he was proved right.
When did that happen, and how did that happen? And was he credited for it?
Yes. So he died in 1865. He was quite young. It was a tragic death, all tied up with his work and people not believing him. So he died in 1865. And in 1891, I think it was, he was recognised. Doctors finally started to realise. I mean, it took time to trickle through. In Wales, when I researched, in the early 1900s, they were still not washing their hands and all the rest of it. But in the 1890s, it finally, I think some other people had, maybe Lister had done some work, and people were starting to realise that it was important to be hygienic. And so they thought, gosh, this guy was right. So in Hungary, he was recognised. They had a lovely white marble tomb, and they invited obstetricians from all around Europe to come and recognise him, bury him, because up until then, I think he'd had a bit of a pauper's grave. So I think they dug him up, they moved him to Budapest, and they gave him, the funeral that he deserved.
Shame for it all to happen after he's died.
I know. And would you believe his wife, because he married late, this is all in the book, the love story with his wife as well. He was 40, she was 20. So she outlived him, and she actually was there at the ceremony in 1891 to see them finally recognise what he had done.
Oh, nice that she got to see it then, at least. So he was based in Vienna, was he?
He is Hungarian, but he studied in Vienna, went to university in Vienna, and made his discovery in Vienna. But 2 years later, 2 years following his discovery, in about 1850, he went back in disgust. He just left the hospital really quickly because so many of the doctors there didn't believe him. His boss refused to, he actually lost his job. It was terrible. And he ended up going back to Budapest and starting again with his methods there. But wow. Vienna was where it all happened, where the discovery happened. And
so how long did it take you to, when you were doing all the research, was it difficult to sort of come away from the research to start writing, or were you doing them both at the same time?
Yeah, I reckon I was doing them both at the same time. Most of the research I started with was about him, where he was born, how he grew up, how he went to university, and then as we moved then to, because he was born in Hungary, and as he moved to Vienna, I started to research. I had to know Vienna really, really well. I'd visited once before, and so I knew it a little. I did a lot, on the internet. You can get maps, you can get the old maps. It was fascinating. So I had to know, like when I was saying he was walking from here to there, the route he would take, and how I looked at old photos. It was brilliant. I really enjoy the research. I sort of did some of it as I went along. If I read that he'd done this in some part of the university, I had to find out exactly where it was, and it was fascinating.
And why did you choose to write it as a novel as opposed to a biography?
That's a good question. I think because I'd only ever written fiction. It was my second novel, so I was sort of used to writing a historical fictional novel. Like you said at the start, I did a master's in creative writing, and I used some of the, I sort of thought, how should I write this? And looking at notes and things, and, should I write it this way or that way? But it just, once you start writing, it just flows along, and it just seemed to be the best way to write it. Yeah. But there's one interesting thing. I started writing it in first person, and I wrote the whole novel, you won't believe this, in first person, from Semmelweis's point of view. I employed like an editor, and he took one look and said, actually, it took about 4 weeks, but he came back to me and said, you need to write this in third person. This is not a first person, because there's so many other characters involved, and you want to see sort of their viewpoints, and also take a sort of overall look as an author of what's going on. You can't just do this from his point of view. And I thought, this is a lot of work. Can you imagine rewriting a whole novel, from first person into third? So I got a second. I went on another editing course, and my tutor there, Debbie Alper, I've credited her at the end. She's absolutely brilliant, and she read parts of it, and we fed back, and straight away she said, "This isn't right in first person. This has got to be third." So at the start, about a year ago, January last year, I started rewriting the whole thing into third person.
And has it made a difference, do you think? Do you agree with what they said?
Well, they were two experts. I thought, I can't do that. I can't remember his name now, but the first editor I had, I just thought, well, okay, I read what he said, but I thought that's too big a job. But when the second one said it, I thought, I just have to do this. It wasn't as bad as I expected. It's not the case of just doing a search and replace. There's so many aspects of the book change when you change the viewpoints. Yeah. But it took me about 2 months. So I had it done by March last year. I was more or less ready, and I thought, I just want to get this out here, this novel. So I was ready.
Great. Well, if people want to get a copy of A Theory in Vienna, it's out now. It's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Heidi Gallagher, who we've been chatting with today. Heidi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. And yes, it's been lovely chatting to you, Hannah.
You are listening to The Book Show on TRE.
Joining us on the line now is Caroline James. She's the celebrated author of later life fiction, including The Cruise, the #1 bestseller that has captivated cruise ship passengers worldwide, earning its reputation as girl power for the over 60s. Caroline's vibrant storytelling stems from her colourful career. Before becoming a full-time writer, she carved out a fascinating path in the hospitality industry, owning a charming country house hotel and a lively pub. As a media agent, she worked closely with celebrity chefs, giving her an insider's perspective on the glitz, glamour and grit of the culinary world. She's back with us on the book show to talk about her new novel, Atticus Arnott's Great Adventure. The book was born from a simple kitchen table conversation when her husband asked, "How do you fancy spending our winters in Spain?" The book is about 70-year-old Atticus Arnott, who trades the rainy hills of Cumbria for the golden coast of Spain in his beloved vintage camper van. Welcome to the book show, Caroline.
Oh, thank you so much, Hannah, and Happy New Year to you all.
Oh, yes, Happy New Year to you. Lovely to have you back with us. And what a lovely idea for a book. I love that it was inspired by things that you guys have done.
Yeah, it's funny how ideas suddenly come to you, isn't it? It was, as you say, it was born from a kitchen table conversation when my hubby said he fancied going somewhere warmer in the winter. And at that time, we'd got a caravan, and I was sort of reluctant to do it. But anyway, I said, yeah, go on, let's go for it. And we drove the caravan down to Spain. And it was once we'd arrived there and set everything up, slowly the germ of an idea came to me. And that's how Atticus was born, really, yeah.
So tell us about your time in Spain. What was the experience like?
It was wonderful, really. We drove through France the first time. It was ridiculously cold, -17. So it was really to get over the border and get down to Spain. And we ended up stopping just south of Alicante, north of Guadamar, on a campsite called Alania Resorts, which has a lot of more mature people, should I say, go and spend their winters there. And we set everything up, got the caravan in place, got the awning up, and I sort of got my writing room in the awning. And then I just sort of looking around, I realised there's such a fantastic group, eclectic people of all nationalities, that, you know, it was just a perfect place to base a book, really. We had friends who sort of told us a bit about the area. They had a home in Rojales in Quesada, and took us all round the area. So I got to know the area quite well. And the book features lots of different venues and places in that sort of area of Spain. So it was a joy to write. It really was.
Oh, lovely. And nice to be meeting so many different types of people. I mean, obviously you have something in common that you're all there caravanning or camping, but it's amazing how many different types of people something like that can attract.
Yeah, it's fantastic because you've got all sorts of nationalities, you know, Dutch, German, people from all over, and also all sorts of things. I mean, I would ride round on my bicycle and be absolutely gobsmacked by these huge double-decker buses that are mobile homes on wheels that have got everything from sort of a pop-up ballroom to an outside gym and kitchen. And there we are in our modest little caravan. And I just thought that Atticus has got a vintage Westphalia 1980s caravanette that he used to take the family on holiday to Wales in the 1980s. And to sort of put Atticus in this environment amongst all these different caravans and trailers and all sorts of things. It was really good fun.
Oh, nice. So tell us a bit more about your character of Atticus.
Well, how he actually came to my mind was we were sitting in the bar on the campsite in Alania, and there was live music on, and a gentleman walked onto the dance floor, and he got this great big Stetson on, and he was, I would say, round about the age of Atticus. Atticus is 70 in the book, and he started dancing with a lady, and I just looked at him and I said to my husband, "That's Atticus. That guy is Atticus." It was like. It was just a joy to watch him. Now, Atticus is a Cumbrian sheep farmer whose wife had died, sadly, of cancer, and he was distraught and he couldn't get over it. And his son took over the farm and turned it into a glamping area with a farm shop and cafe. And Atticus he just couldn't get his head round anything like that, all the new things that were happening. His daughter Mary in the story comes over from Ireland. She goes through the barn with him, finds the old camper van, and with his grandson, she encourages Atticus to have an adventure because he's never been abroad before. So it's all about having fun in later life. They nickname me the Queen of Later Life Fiction. I like writing about more mature characters, sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, because I think at our time of life we should all be having a bit of fun. But the book does take you on a roller coaster. It's two parallel stories. The father and daughter are walking separate but parallel journeys, and they're both sort of confronting their past and with the courage to start anew, because Mary's life is crumbling a bit in Ireland as well.
So tell us a bit more about Mary. What's happening with her?
So Mary is a twin. Mungo is her twin brother. It is Mungo who's taken over the farm. Mary is married to a very wealthy estate agent in Ireland, and she's got 4 children, and this takes up all her sort of time and life. And unbeknown to Mary, and trustingly, she doesn't realise, but her marriage is actually crumbling. So that's sort of as Atticus is finding a new life, and actually he does, it's not giving away any spoilers, he does fall in love while he's in Spain. Mary's life is sort of falling out of love and crumbling, so that's how the two stories run together. But of course, it's a rom-com, Hannah. There's all sorts of ups and downs, particularly with later life characters, because we've all got baggage, we've all got great stories to tell. There's always going to be a happy ever after ending in a rom-com, isn't there?
Yeah, nice. So can you tell us anything about his love interest?
His love interest is purely by chance. He's walking along the beach in La Marina, where there is a lovely cafe on the beach where hubby and I used to go lots and lots of times for breakfast, or just have a glass of sangria in the winter and, watch the sunset. So Atticus is having his breakfast in the cafe, and he is served by a lady who just takes his breath away. He orders the breakfast and he looks up, and it literally is love at first sight. But Britta has quite a lot going on in her life, and that is slowly revealed through the rest of the book. It's not sort of a straightforward love affair. There's ups and downs along the way, again, without giving out any spoilers. Britta is Dutch, and she has come to live in a little old fisherman's cottage, which actually exists in La Marina. Those gorgeous cottages that don't look like anything from the outside and actually are just delightful from the inside. If you walk along the beach, you'll see them, where people are on the beach fishing. It's just delightful.
Oh, nice. So was it nice putting so much of your experiences in that particular area of Spain into the book? I mean, is that something that you normally do?
Yeah, it was lovely. I like to do a lot of it. All my books, I write quite a lot of books about cruises as well at the minute, so I do like to do the research. I've just come back from Egypt because I'm writing a book called The Nile Cruise at the minute. But I think there's nothing better than being in situ. So to be in Spain, to actually be sitting in a cafe, having a glass of sangria, watching people and everything, it brings the story to life to me. If I can smell it, sort of touch it, feel it, then it makes it easier for me to create the characters and create the story around them. And it really is a lovely, lovely part of Spain. I just found the people absolutely delightful. And winter, the temperature is so pleasant and kind. That particular area, you've got the salt lakes and the mountains, and just a lovely, healthy environment to be in. Both hubby and I really felt the benefit of doing the winters in Spain.
Oh, nice. And yes, it's really fun research to do, getting to go on holiday to all these lovely places.
Yeah, it is. It's as an author, I think you can get anything you want off the internet, of course. But for me, nothing really replaces physically going to the place that you're writing the book about. Another book that's come out is called The Arctic Cruise, and we did an Arctic cruise to get the research for that. So it was very different and, lovely. It's quite a challenge, really.
Yeah. So how many winters did you spend in Spain then?
Yeah, we did 3. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. And did you make friends? Were there lots of other people that were doing the same thing?
Yeah, we did make friends and kept in touch with people. And of course, we had a friend who actually lived in Rahalis, so that's nice as well. And they're obviously, well into the community, the expat community and everything. So it was very welcoming and very lovely. And I can totally understand why people want to stay there and want to spend their days there. It's completely understandable. It's a great place to be.
Yeah. Wasn't an option for you? More permanent thing?
It's difficult at the minute, isn't it? With the old 90 days and everything.
Yeah.
It is a bit difficult. Husband would move tomorrow.
Right.
I'm probably a bit more of a home bird. I actually do really like England. I don't even complain when it's raining, so I'm probably quite unusual from that point of view.
Fair enough. Well, if people want to get a copy of Atticus Arnott's Great Adventure, it's available now on our website, tre.radio, and it's by Caroline James, who we've been chatting with. Caroline, thanks so much for joining us again.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and happy reading, everybody.
You are listening to Hannah Murray on The Book Show.
Joining us on the line now is Paul Quinlan. He's an academic with a long track record of publishing in the field of political science. Having worked and lived in the UK, Italy and Australia, he's drawn on his knowledge of politics and academic life in constructing the plot and some of the characters for his debut novel, Flashover. It's loosely inspired by the terrible series of murders attributed to the monster of Florence in the 1980s whilst he was living there. Welcome to The Book Show, Paul.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you. So tell us about this time when you were living in Florence and these awful murders that were taking place.
Yeah, sure. So I was lucky enough to be a student there between 1983 and 86. I went out there to work on a PhD at a place called the European University Institute. So, much to be happy about in terms of that period in my life, because it was a wonderful place to be. But within a few days of arriving there, the first, not the first of a series of murders, but the first one that became known to me, was in the series of murders attributed to what became known as the Monster of Florence, Il Mostro di Firenze, happened. Actually, it turns out that this was one of a series of double slayings that happened between 1968 and 1985. The Italian authorities didn't actually realise they were linked initially. The first murder happened in 1968. They were always, I should say, killings of courting couples, basically, in fairly isolated rural areas around the city. And that was certainly the pattern with the first killing. And they convicted a jealous husband of killing his wife and her lover. Then there was another killing in 74, and then there was another double killing in 81. And it was only after the third of those killings that they realised there was a link. And the link was the gun that was used in all of the killings. It was the same gun every time.
Wow.
So, they're not completely sure, but at this stage, whether they put the wrong man away after the first killing or whether they put the right guy away, but he had somehow passed the gun on to others who, had then used it for their nefarious ends. But then there was a series of other killings, including the one in September 83, which happened just after I arrived out there. The last one happened in September 85 as a young French couple who were camping in a rural area just outside a small town called San Casciano Valdipesa. And since then, there were no other killings, but it was a really strange thing. The whole thing, I think, is very well known in Italy, certainly in Florence and Tuscany. They did eventually convict three people who became known as in Italian, compagni di merende, which means something like the kind of tea buddies, because one of the accused said, look, we weren't up to anything bad. We're just a bunch of guys who get together to drink tea together and have a chat. They were convicted, as I say, but actually there were huge doubts that remained over whether really the evidence was that strong. And there were several murders in this series of 8 double killings, which they never got anybody for at all. Oh. So, I kind of remembered all of this. I lived through some of this, saw it going on, saw the effect it had on particularly young people who were kind of scared to go out together into, quiet areas anyway. And then many years later, it came back to my mind. I was back in the UK by this time, and I watched a documentary on this and then a dramatization. There have been a couple of dramatizations, actually, including a recent one on Netflix. And it went through my mind that the thing I'd always wanted to do, which was write a novel, could be based loosely on this kind of idea. So Flashover is not just a historical kind of reworking of what happened in Italy. It's set in the UK in the 1970s and 1980s, but it does involve similar kinds of double killings, basically, of courting couples in rural areas. And it's really a study of, to some extent, the personality and motivations of the perpetrators. It's not a whodunit, so we know fairly early on in the book who did do it, but it's more of a study of them and their impact on victims and the families of victims. And as the story unfolds, it's about whether they do or do not eventually come a cropper, so to speak.
And how did you go about trying to get into the mind of both the victims' families and also the killer?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, at one level, maybe it's just an insight into my own depraved or warped mentality. I don't know. But I can claim a little bit of kind of professional insight as well, because as you mentioned, I've been throughout my career a professional political scientist studying, political behaviour, really many things like electoral behaviour and the way that parties are organised and so on. But in recent years, I've got into political psychology a bit. And one of the things that I, in conjunction with other people working in the profession, have done is to look at the psychology, but particularly in terms of personality traits. And in particular, the relevance to this book is a group of personality traits which are collectively known as the dark triad. And these are measures of psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. So if you look at the perpetrators in the book actually come from the world of politics. They didn't have to. I could have chosen somebody from something, another sphere, but obviously given my background, I'm interested in and somewhat knowledgeable about politics. And I certainly don't mean to imply that all politicians are narcissistic, Machiavellian psychopaths, by the way. But we do know that they tend to be amongst the people who score quite highly on the measuring indices and scales that psychologists use for those personality traits. Not to, clinical, sort of criminal levels. They're not all kind of budding Rose and Fred Wests or anything like that. But it's that the kind of work that I'd been doing gave me some insight, I think, into the personalities and motivations of the perpetrators. But I have to admit, I have no personal experience, never having been a serial killer myself.
And so the whole thing is set in the UK as opposed to Italy?
It is, yeah. There is a nod to the Italian provenance of the idea in terms of one of the characters is an Italian. But I don't go to Italy as such in this particular story.
Okay. And where does the title Flashover come from?
Oh, okay. So that's a good question. I can't directly answer that without giving away something really important about the end of the book. But there is, I hope, a dramatic and exciting denouement, a climax to the story. And it's only when readers have got that far they will understand why it's called Flashover, and also why the book is set in the 1970s and 80s, because it kind of climaxes in a particular historical event that happened in the 1980s. Okay. I think that's about as much of a giveaway as I should give.
Fair enough. And now that the book is out there, has it made you want to write more?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I've got a couple of ideas I've started working on recently, and have even started the first kind of initial scribblings of a new manuscript. But it'll take some time before I have anything ready, I'm sure. But yeah, and the funny thing is, I mean, these are all in the crime thriller genre. I always wanted to write novels someday. I never for a minute thought I'd write in that genre. I always thought I was going to write something about politically historical figures who are significant. And instead, this story came to me a few years ago, as I said, and I started writing it, and I just found it so interesting, so enjoyable, the process of writing, that I've now rather got into that and think I want to carry on writing in this kind of genre.
Yeah, great. Well, if people want to get a copy of Flashover, it's available now on our website, tre.radio, and it's by Paul Quinlan, who we've been chatting with. Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
You're really welcome. Thank you.
The Book Programme. Presented by Hannah Murray.
The Book Show on TRE is sponsored by CK La Quinta, a residency care home for the elderly like no other in Marbella. Find out more at cklaquinta.com.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit tre.radio.